Imagine traveling 15,000 miles just to write a book. That's what Marco Polo did, and it changed history forever. Let's go back over 700 years to a time when the world felt big and mysterious. There were no airplanes, no trains, and no internet. Most people never even left their villages. But one young man named Marco Polo did something incredible. He set off on a journey that would take him to lands most Europeans had never dreamed of. He traveled across deserts, over mountains, and through bustling cities, and what he found was a world beyond imagination. This is his story, the story of how Marco Polo connected East and West. Welcome to Whispered Tales by Joe, where history meets today's world. In each quiet moment, we uncover lessons from the past that resonate with our lives now. Let's journey back in time together. Marco Polo was born in 1254 in Venice, Italy. Venice was a city of canals and merchants, a place full of colorful fabrics, shiny jewels, and spices that smelled like adventure. Marco came from a family of traders. His father, Niccolo, and his uncle, Maffeo, were already famous for their travels. They had gone east before, and they told tales of a great empire ruled by a powerful leader called Kublai Khan. One day in 1271, when Marco was just 17, his father and uncle asked him if he wanted to join them on a journey back to the east, to the lands of Kublai Khan. Marco said yes. He had no idea that he was about to go on one of the greatest adventures in history. Across deserts so wide and seas so grand, Marco Polo traveled far from his homeland. With camels and courage, he marched with pride to lands where the wonders could not be denied. Their goal was to return to the royal palace of Kublai Khan, the Mongol Emperor who ruled much of Asia, including China. The journey was not just about trade. It was about building a relationship between the Mongols and Europe. When Marco Polo's father, Niccolo Polo, and his uncle, Maffeo Polo, first met Kublai Khan during their earlier journey, the Khan had shown great interest in Christianity and Western culture. He requested that they return with 100 educated Christians who could teach him and his people about the religion, as well as Western knowledge. This led to their return journey in 1271, with letters from the Pope Gregory, the 10th, and gifts for Kublai Khan. Although the Pope was unable to send the full 100 missionaries that Kublai Khan had asked for, but he sent 2 friars to accompany the Polos, and their mission was to spread Christianity and bring valuable information from the West to the Khan's empire. Okay, so after the preparation, the Polo families and 2 friars departed from Venice. And then, their ship sailed through Adriatic Sea and went into the Mediterranean Sea. Here, they was facing the risk of pirate. However, they managed and went on with their journey. They stopped at some ports like Rhodes to fill up foods and water, and Cyprus to prepare for an arrival at Acre, modern-day Israel. Over here, they are facing a risk of political conflict as the Eastern Mediterranean, especially around Acre, was a hotspot of political tension due to the Crusades. The region saw frequent battles between Christian crusaders and Muslim forces. Anyway, they managed to arrive at Acre, old name is Akko. Here, Polo managed to visit places like Jerusalem, and from Acre their journey continued by land through the Levant. There were a lot of conflicts in this region, and also the challenges from bandits, which made the two friars decided to abandon their trip here as they were too frightened. So from here, the Polos family continued to push on without them, and they arrived in Baghdad. It was a major center of trade and culture during Marco Polo's time. From here, they headed northeast to Tabriz. At the time, it was capital of Il Khanate, Mongol Dynasty from 1265, and Tabriz was a significant city on the Silk Road. After Tabriz, Polo's family and the caravan crossing the vast Persian desert to head to Hormuz of southern Iran. In Hormuz, they considered a sea route to China, but chose to continue overland due to the dangers of the sea. They then departed for Khorasan, which was a key hub along the Silk Road. It connected Central Asia with Persia. From there, they head east to Balkh, which known as the Mother of Cities, a major center of trade, culture, and learning during the time of Marco Polo. They then headed east to climb and cross Pamir Mountains, which called the roof of the world, and snowy mountains where the air was thin and cold. Then they reached Kashgar. This was a Central Asian Silk Road trading hub. From here, they visited Yarkand, a traditional town along the Silk Road, and prepared to cross Gobi Desert. This is one of the harshest environments on Earth. It was a land of scorching days, freezing nights, and endless sand dunes. They then managed to reach an oasis town and desert called Kuka. This is an important oasis town along the Silk Road. After a rest, their caravan continued east through the desert, and finally reached the Great Wall of China. They crossed through and arrived at the city named Dunhuang, which famous Magao caves or Buddhist grottos. It was an important religious and cultural stop. From Dunhuang, they headed southeast to Lanzhou. This was a traditional Chinese town next to Yellow River. Then, after nearly 3.5 years of travel, they finally arrived at the royal palace of Kublai Khan in Chengdu, China. This was where Kublai Khan's summer capital located. Through deserts vast and mountains high, Marco traveled far and wide to lands where silk and spices flow. The stories of his journey grow. So after almost 4 years of travel, Marco and his family finally reached China. This was not the China we know today. It was the Mongol Empire and stretched from China to Eastern Europe, ruled by the mighty Kublai Khan, grandson of the famous Genghis Khan. Kublai Khan's palace was unlike anything Marco had ever seen. It was enormous, with golden walls and silk curtains, and it shimmered like something out of a dream. Marco wrote about grand banquets where people ate on plates made of silver and drank from cups of gold. He described seeing fireworks for the first time, bright sparks that lit up the night sky like falling stars. Kublai Khan was fascinated by travelers from far-off lands and the stories they brought from the West. He welcomed Marco Polo with open arms. Marco quickly earned the Khan's trust, and Kublai Khan appointed him to important positions within his royal palace. For the next 17 years, Marco Polo would serve as a diplomat and emissary, traveling throughout the vast Mongol Empire. Marco traveled to many parts of China, including cities that no European had ever seen before. He visited Beijing, then known as Khanbaliq, and marveled at its size and beauty. It was much larger and more advanced than any city in Europe at the time. He also visited places like Yunnan in southwestern China, and even ventured to parts of Southeast Asia, such as Burma, modern-day Myanmar. One of the things that amazed Marco the most was the use of paper money in China. In Europe, people used coins made of gold, silver, or other metals. But in China, the government issued paper notes that could be exchanged for goods. This was something entirely new to Marco, and seemed like magic. Polo also wrote about seeing a mysterious black stone that could burn hotter and longer than wood. This, of course, was coal, something still relatively unknown in Europe. China during the reign of Kublai Khan was a place of great wealth and innovation. Marco described the cities as bustling hubs of trade, with markets selling silk, porcelain, tea, and spices. Chinese artisans were skilled in making beautiful pottery and intricate designs that fascinated Marco. He was also amazed by the advanced technology in China, including large ships that could carry hundreds of sailors, something Europe had never seen. Marco also wrote about the Grand Canal, a huge waterway that stretched for miles and connected different parts of China. Boats sailed up and down, carrying goods like silk, spices, and tea. It was like a superhighway, but made of water. The Chinese people were also incredibly organized. The government was efficient, with a postal system that allowed messages to travel quickly across the vast empire. Marco Polo admired the way the empire was run, with officials appointed based on their merit rather than birth, a system quite different from the feudal Europe he knew. Marco's detailed descriptions of Chinese customs, food, and inventions brought the East to life for people back in Europe. For example, he wrote about the unique Chinese dishes like noodles, which many historians believe helped introduce pasta to Europe. In cities vast where traders meet, the wonders of the world are sweet. From spices rare to silk so fine, Marco's tales transcend through time. During his travels, Marco Polo didn't just stay in China. He ventured to other parts of Asia as well. He visited Tibet, where he encountered monks and mystics who practiced forms of Buddhism that were completely new to him. Marco described their strange customs, including meditation practices and their belief in reincarnation. In the south, Marco traveled to India and described the wealth and luxury of the Indian royal palaces. He saw temples, elephants, and jewels that amazed him. He also traveled to Indonesia and wrote about the island's rich in spices, especially pepper, cloves, and nutmeg, which were highly valued in Europe. His travels took him to Persia, where he described the splendor of the Persian Empire and its capital, Tabriz. Marco's accounts of the Persian rulers, their grand palaces, and rich culture were among the first detailed descriptions to reach Europe. After spending nearly 2 decades in Kublai Khan's service, the Polo family wanted to return to Venice. However, Kublai Khan was reluctant to let them leave because he valued their knowledge and skills. The situation changed when the Khan agreed to let them go on the condition that they escort Princess Kokachin to Persia, where she was to marry Arghun, the Mongol ruler of Persia. The Polos and the princess traveled by sea from Chenzhou around 1291, passing through places like Sumatra, Indonesia, where with the dense jungle and palm trees, Colombo, Sri Lanka, with golden beaches as seen, palm trees, and bustling port, and Calicut, India. This was an important trade and merchants' hub. Arriving in Hormuz, from there, they journeyed overland to Tabriz in 1293, which was the Mongol capital in Persia at the time. Princess Kokachin was intended to marry Arghun, the Mongol ruler of Persia, but when they arrived in Persia, Arghun had already died. Instead, Kokachin married Ghazan, Arghun's son, fulfilling the diplomatic mission. After leaving the princess, they traveled overland to Constantinople and then to Venice in 1295, returning home after 24 years. Marco Polo's return to Venice was just in time for another adventure: war. Venice was fighting a war with the rival city of Genoa, and Marco was captured and thrown into prison. While in prison, he met a writer named Rusty Chalot, who helped him write down all of his incredible stories. The book they wrote together, The Travels of Marco Polo, became one of the most famous books of the Middle Ages. Marco Polo's journey was more than just an adventure. It was a bridge between two very different worlds. He brought stories of the East to the West, stories that opened people's eyes and made them curious. Thanks to Marco Polo, Europe learned about the riches and wonders of Asia, and it sparked a desire to explore and trade. Explorers like Christopher Columbus read Marco's book and decided to set off on their own adventures. Marco Polo didn't invent new lands or discover continents, but he helped people understand that the world was much bigger than they thought. He showed that with courage and curiosity, the unknown could become known. He traveled the deserts and crossed the Great Sea. He showed us how wondrous the world could be. Marco Polo, the young boy from Venice, brought East and West together, a legacy endless. One of the most important parts of Marco's journey was the Silk Road. This was not a single road, but a network of routes that connected Europe and Asia. Traders carried silk, spices, gold, and other treasures along this route. Marco Polo traveled along the Silk Road, and he described the many people he met: merchants, nomads, and rulers. The Silk Road was dangerous. There were bandits who wanted to steal the treasures being carried, and the weather could be harsh, with freezing cold in the mountains and blistering heat in the desert. But it was also full of life and excitement. There were markets with goods from all over the world, and people speaking different languages. Marco Polo's descriptions of the Silk Road made people in Europe dream of these far-off places. They wanted the silk, the spices, and the gold. Marco's stories helped start a time of exploration, where Europeans wanted to find their own ways to reach these amazing lands. Some people today wonder if Marco Polo really went to China. There are no records of Marco in Chinese writings, and some things he described were a little exaggerated. But most historians agree that Marco did travel to the East, even if he may have added a little extra excitement to his stories. Whether every detail was true or not, Marco's tales inspired people. They made the world seem a little smaller and a lot more interesting. He showed that adventure was possible, and that even a young boy from Venice could see the wonders of the world. Marco Polo's journey was long and full of challenges, but it changed the world. He didn't sail across oceans or fight great battles. He simply traveled, observed, and shared what he saw. And by doing that, he connected people. He made East and West understand each other just a little bit better. Through deserts, mountains, and oceans wide, Marco Polo traveled with hope as his guide. He brought back stories, treasures untold. A bridge between worlds, more precious than gold. So, what about you? If you had the chance to travel to a far-off place, would you go? Would you dare to see the world beyond your doorstep, just like Marco Polo did?